Hello everyone, this is Marimbawe. Today, since it's the first video I'm making, we're going to talk about the inner skill tree, skills, equipment, and other core parts of the game. First things first, let's start with choosing your own character. So this is where you will have to choose whichever starting class you want to get your early experience going. As you can see, there's Rogue, there's Warrior, and Mage. Each class has its own quirks, strengths, and weaknesses, but I'll recommend Warrior for basically any new player. If you really wish to have a hardcore experience, you should go for Mage. Let's talk about stats now. As you can see, there are 10 different base stats here above, and another 8 regarding elemental types. With each and every level, you gain an additional 5 HP. Attack is the stat you should look out for if you deal physical damage. It doesn't work like in any other games where the amount of attacking stats increases your damage by that amount. Instead, it increases the base damage of the attack you're dealing by a percentage. So, say you deal 20 damage with a skill. If you have 100 attack, which is 100% increased damage, you will deal 40 damage. If you have 150 attack, you will deal 50, and so on and so forth. You get the idea. Magic works the same, obviously, as for magic damage types. Next up, I got defense and magic defense. Both of them work the same, by the way. So, each point of defense and defense increases your damage resistance and chance to reflect by 0.1% per point. So if you have 10 defense, you will have an extra 1% chance to deflect and 1% damage resistance. Stack it up to 500 for example, and you would have a 50-50 deflect chance with a 50% damage reduction. Don't forget the defense buffs or debuffs. They work really well for or against tanks. Agility. This one is interesting. The faster you are, the higher the chance you have to roll first. What this means is that a very fast character can be very unlucky and be second to a tank. Don't worry, that's a rare occurrence. Agility is always a very good stat, since it can make your runs more efficient. In multiplayer games, being first or second is very good, since it allows you to set up elemental bursts, kill enemies, or buff without much restraint. For crit-based characters, you will always want to be very fast and flat first, so you can deal with the enemy DPS in order to have an easier time later. Tanks don't have much issue with this, since agility is not their ideal stat. Next up, crit chance is self-explanatory. It increases your chance to crit by 5% for each 100 points or 0.05 per point, if you wish to be very technical. Sometimes you may be super lucky and crit a lot. Sometimes you may not crit at all. Pray to our own Jesus. Next up, it's crit power. Crit power is extremely interesting since it's probably the only stat which is able to increase your damage exponentially, meaning the more you stack other stats well enough, like attack or magic or any elemental powers, the more damage you will deal, the harder you will hit with a crit. You most likely won't have access to this one until the later floors, such as floor 7 and floor 8, where it's abundant. Next up is heal. It works just like attack and magic, except it's for heals. Simple enough, heals can also crit and are affected by crit power. Splendid, isn't it? And lastly, evasion. This one is a handful. It allows you to dodge skills, meaning you won't take any damage and won't be able to suffer any effects from being hit otherwise. Really good stat, you can take it through buffs, or by dropping dexterity on a character, or some equipment items. Now, what is an elemental resistance? It's a stat which increases or decreases the amount of overall damage you take from the corresponding elemental skill. So, if you have 10 earth defense and get hit by an earth skill, you would theoretically take 10% less damage and then the defense or magic defense stats will come into play. It's really strong and will help you no matter what. Then there's elemental power. It increases the overall damage you deal with a skill of the certain color by the percentage of the amount of that element's power. Yes, you will have items which increase elemental power by a huge amount, and you will love them. Now, let's discuss each starter class. But first, let's jump right into Affinity Chamber. Here, we have a second level of customization for your character. As you can see, I use a mix of dexterity, which increases my speed, crits, and dodges, while will increases my body's magic stats and magic defense. This is a bit more complicated to explain, and that's a min-max version of my build, so we will only talk about each stat from the Affinity Chamber and what is it good at. Will is very good for mage classes, tanks, and mech classes. I will discuss the later two in the next video. Dexterity. It's great for any crit based build, as long as you have a stable amount of attack and magic. Of course, you can stack a lot of crit, that works as well. Dexterity also grants you evasion, so you will have a lot to evade by the time you finish stacking it. Strength makes you more resistant to physical damage, while also increasing your attack stat. Great for anyone except pure mages. And lastly, Endurance. It's great for any tank and healer. Perhaps a tanky healer? Who knows? Now that we finished explaining the Affinity Chamber points, we will talk about the inner circle of the skill tree without the mixed passives. Now I'm going to start with Warrior. As I have mentioned, Warrior is the easiest class to progress within the game. It's got really good skills, which complement its playstyle and can trigger some very nice combos. But this doesn't mean the other classes can't do similar things. Firstly, put all your Affinity Chamber points to strength. It will be enough to keep you going through the game. Now, each point in the skill tree grants you stats. So, if you look closely, for each point you place, you will get 2 HP, 2 attack, and 2 defense points. They are valuable overall. Let's start with Thrust. It's the bread and butter of any physical based class and mixed passive users. I'm going to talk about that in another video, so stay tuned. It's a nice skill which will always deal medium damage if you have enough skills to use. Let's talk about each part of the skill. It deals light physical damage. If the previous skill is not thrust, it deals medium damage. The weapon infuses the element. So, it's a skill which rewards you for not spamming it. Basically, what you want to do is use a different skill after casting thrust. Any type of skill works, as long as it's different from one we mentioned. You will deal really good amounts of damage against your opponents. What about the elemental infusion, you ask? It fuses your weapon's element. Yes, this may sound groundbreaking, but it allows you to create combos which increase your damage by even more. Those are called elemental bursts, and we'll discuss about them later. Of course, thrust is going to infuse the water element, but we can always choose another element if we want. Anyways, in conclusion, really good skill. Next up, Shield Bash. It deals light physical fire damage and reduces the enemy's healing. This is not going to be very useful just now, but it will help you create those nice elemental bursts. In the future though, you will depend on using this against the healers in the game. Recharge Blow. This skill deals a medium amount of damage and steals the enemy's life. Lifesteal doesn't work with the heal stat, but it works with the amount of damage you deal to the enemy. It's pretty good and will always help you no matter what. Warrior's first passive is self-explanatory. It increases your HP. Next, we have Wolf's Blow. Remember when we talked about how having certain elements on your weapon will help you deal a lot of damage? Well, this will be your friend. It doesn't deal as much damage by itself, but it decreases the enemy's physical defense by a good amount. Let me explain buffs and debuffs. This is all speculation, but each buff and debuff is additive, meaning it will increase or decrease someone's stats by a fixed amount. There's also levels for those buffs and debuffs, which range from level 1, the weakest, to level 3, which is the strongest. These buffs can also be stacked, so you can have a level 1, level 2, and a level 3 buff of the same type. Wolf's Blow inflicts level 2 debuff, which is really nice to have. Now we have something different. Protection is a different type of skill, a buff. You can recognize buffs by their color. This skill grants you a level 2 defense buff along with regeneration. Regens do not have a level and solely depend on your maximum HP, increasing in strength the lower health you are. It's really good and will help you in the long run. And lastly, we have the warrior's second passive. It increases your elemental resistance by 5%. So instead of these 5 elemental powers we have, it increases itself by 5 points for each shield. Now that we explained the inner circle of warrior, let's move on to rogue. Rogues benefit from both strength and dexterity. I advise using 3/4 of your affinity chamber points into dexterity and the rest into strength. Or you can put them all in dexterity or strength, but you may or may not have issues with the damage. Rogue gets 3 attack points, 1 agility, and 3 crit chance. So please bear that in mind. They may not crit as much in the early game, but once they get their crit items, which will start becoming more frequent from floor 6 and up, you will start critting a lot, and hard. Rogues have the basic skill called Slash. It deals a light amount of damage and increases the damage over time effects by 2 turns. It's really good against tanks, since bleeds and poisons deal damage based on the maximum HP. You will not regret using them. Also, one little tip. Get Thrust as rogue. You will thank me later. Next, we have Scorching Dagger. It deals a nice amount of damage and procs lifesteal on crit. It's a very funny skill actually. Some people hate this skill because it won't crit when you actually need it. But when it crits, it gives you a lot of health. One advice is to counter with it, so if you don't crit, you get a shield. If you do crit, however, you will gain health and a shield. Pretty cool, right? Next, we have Sneak Attack. Remember Slash? This skill bleeds the enemies. It also deals medium air damage. It's pretty self-explanatory, used against any tanks or any beefy opponent for extra damage. Rogue's first passive increases the attack by 5%. Simple enough. Next. Leech Arrow is the second lifesteal ability of Rogue. It's got a recent buff, which makes it really good to use now. Since you get crit with it, get health, a counter shield if you wish, and get regen. It's really nice for self-sustain and it will always help you no matter what. Now, here comes Rogue's favorite buff, Critical Shooting. It grants you a level 2 crit chance buff and a level 1 crit power. Crit power exponentially increases your crit damage, so it's really valuable anyhow, of course, when you crit. And Rogue's second passive increases your critical chance by 10%. Now, this doesn't mean you get a flat 200 crit chance. No, it increases the crit chance you have by 10%. So if you have 1000 crit chance, you will get another 100 from the passive. It's good, nonetheless. And the last but not the least, we have Mage. This was actually my starting class, so it's really nice to explain how it works. I recommend you put all of your points into Well so you can kill them before they kill you. Yeah, it's a pain in the ass to play Mage if you just started out, but don't worry, mages become really stupid once you level up more. Each skill grants you 3 magic, which works the same as attack, 1 magic defense, and 3 health points. Let's talk about Mage's basic skill, Magic Ball. As you can see, it deals light damage, but it doesn't change the elemental blight. What does that mean? I'm going to show you. Now, let's use a Fireball. Oops. See that outline? This is a Fire Blight. Whenever you use a skill which is of a certain element, it will leave a blight of that element on the enemy. You can use different skills which will trigger the elemental burst, as shown here by the little big border. Let's try the boulder sign for example. Let's wait a bit. And there we go. You see that little explosion there? That was an elemental burst. It increases your damage by around 20%. So use this whenever you get a chance. Now back to our magic ball. Let's try it on the heavy set. Notice something? The blight doesn't change. That's what it does. So, in theory, you can use an area skill like Winds of Change, and then spam Magic Ball for infinite elemental bursts. Let's try it out. As you can see, it damages the enemy for far higher, and I can counter with it, so I can be immortal theoretically against tanks. And he's dead. It's a very strong skill, and it will most likely be your bread and butter if you don't really know what to do. So you may have noticed that I didn't mention a skill from here, which is actually usable by everyone. It's Mystical Strike. Most of the people actually don't know what to do with it, and they will just use Activate. Since Counter and Activate were mentioned in the tutorial, I won't mention it again. Most of the time when someone is low HP, most of them will use Mystical Strike to gain a counter shield, HP, and damage the enemy at the same time. It's very useful and will help you all the time against any monsters. And if you're a warrior, do use this with a counter and then thrust, because it's gonna be very good. Let's go back to our skills. Next up is Fireball. It's simple. It deals heavy fire damage. It will become even nicer with the next skill, which is Icing Shock. Remember Oops Blow? It's just like this one. It does more damage. It's a water skill and debuffs the enemy with a level 2 magic defense. Use Icing Shock and then Fireball for an easy and tasty barbecue. Next up, the first passive of Mage increases your heals. Simple enough, it's the same case as Rogue's second passive. Moving on to the next skill, we got Healing Light. Remember Shield Bash? You will use that skill against people who use this one and a few other skills. This Healing Light heals you for a decent amount and increases your evasion by 1 level. And a nice skill, use it when you got the chance. And now we got Concentration. Really fun buff. It grants you a level 2 magic buff and a level 1 heal buff. If you crit though, you get the level 2 heal buff instead of 1. It's really valuable for any magic based class and will never let you down. And the second passive of Mage is an elemental power increase, just like the one we've noticed here. Of course, we've got this. Now we got 5 of each. Really strong and will help you with a lot of damage.